Yes, madam. Okay, ma'am.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Good morning to some of you on the other side of the globe. First of all, apologies for the 10-minute delay. There was some technical issues here. I'm very happy and very delighted to have Timothy John Brookes, who is known as Tim Brookes to most of you, to our 53rd Foundation Day lecture series. Professor Tim graduated from Oxford University. He also has a postgraduate certificate in education from Oxford University again. He also tried to complete a course on MFA in creative writing. I believe he did only one semester or whatever for reasons only known to him. As most of you know, Tim is the founder and executive director of the Endangered Alphabets Project, a non-profit organization dedicated to preserving and educating about cultural endangerment through carving endangered texts and creating educational materials. He is the author of the Atlas of Endangered Alphabets that came out in 2019, an interactive online atlas, an encyclopedia of indigenous and minority writing systems. At the Endangered Alphabets Project, he has several responsibilities, including strategic planning, global research, fundraising, which is very important, of course, making public presentations like this one, exhibitions and lectures in various countries, collaborating with indigenous and minority groups worldwide, creating hand-carved and hand-painted artwork, publishing, of course, books, games, and educational materials. Before starting the Endangered Languages Alphabet program, he was a program director, professional writing program in Vermont. And also he has also served as the founder and editor-in-chief of the Champlain College Publishing Initiative. He was interim director of the professional writing program, instructor at various places, editor-in-chief North by Northeast magazine, staff writer also for various presses like Burlington Free Press, Vermont, Vanguard Press. He has taught English in different places, college writing especially. There are quite a bit of activities. He was also a co-founder of Writers Without Borders, a non-profit organization dedicated to improving global healthcare communication, especially in the developing world. He has published quite a bit. The most important works are Endangered Alphabets Word Search Puzzles in 2020, The Ghosts of Good Intentions in 2015, first time author in 2015, in 2014. Quite many other books are there. One interesting book is The End of Polio, American Public Health Association. As you can see, he has varied interests. He has also worked on different languages, given radio programs, contributing essays for quite a bit of media. He has several awards and honors. One is The Guitar and American Life, was chosen as one of the best books of 2005 by Library Journal. Another one is A Hell of a Place to Lose a Cow, was chosen as one of the best travel books of 2000 by the New York Times Book Review and Book List. National Geographic also chose Rediscovering America. It was an honorable mention in best travel writing. He has presented his work in more than 400 colleges and universities, conferences, museums, galleries, and libraries over the past 30 years, including Harvard University, Yale, Cambridge, Explorers Hall, National Geographic Headquarters, Washington, D.C., the Library of Congress, and the Smithsonian. I think Most of you assembled here must have seen his activities on Facebook. He's very active in Facebook, and that's how many of us got introduced to him. It's indeed a great pleasure to have you with us, Tim. And I'm glad finally we could make it, though your lecture was scheduled back in July. For some reasons or the other, we had to reschedule it, and you were kind enough to adjust the dates with us. Thank you so much. And I invite you on behalf of the Central Institute of Indian Languages in joining us for the 53rd Foundation Day lecture series. And it's basically, we are marking the Foundation Day of our institute. We have completed 52 years of our journey. So now let us listen to you on your topic, which people are waiting to hear about. So the floor is yours. The topic, what you have given us, I think it's the same on your slide. New scripts for all languages, writing, identity, and belonging. Yes. Now, Tim, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And first of all, thank you for inviting me. Thanks to everybody who has joined the talk. And in a minute, in just a minute, when I do the audio cue, your technical team will start my PowerPoint. But actually, this is kind of a serious point that I want to make, because I hate PowerPoints, and partly because I would far rather be talking to you than sort of just be a voice in your ear while there's some sort of slide up there. But also because PowerPoints give the impression that they're factual, they are the last word on the subject, and that they're accurate. So I need to tell you what happened when I was putting this PowerPoint together. So it was almost ready. And yesterday, a very strange thing happened, which was I realized I needed to make some corrections, some factual corrections. And PowerPoint wouldn't let me do it. Every time I tried to delete something, it would delete the entire slide. And I thought, this is actually a good thing. I have invented the fallible PowerPoint. So this really comes to the heart of the talks that I give, which is that what I have to offer you are not facts, but suggestions and ideas. So many of you, I'm absolutely confident, know much more than I do. And in fact, one of the reasons why I am interested in doing this talk is because I'm hoping that those of you who do know things that I don't will contact me and set me straight, give me information, and become valuable participants in my endeavors. So here we go with the fallible PowerPoint. And of course, it starts with acknowledgements. Professor Papaswamy, of course, for inviting me. But here's some people you may not know. So Piers Kelly, he is one of the very few scholars who is doing field research in emerging scripts for minority cultures or by minority cultures. And I'm going to be quoting him a few times during my talk. Anshuman Pandey and Michael Everson have both been extraordinarily important in the presentation of Unicode proposals, especially in the region of South Asia. Actually, can you back up, please? Wait, if you could just wait, that's better, right? Wait until I do the audio cue and then move the slide on. That'd be great. Biswajit Mandal has taught me more than anybody else about newly created writing systems in South Asia. And I also want to recognize and honor the Abenaki people. So they are the ancestral people of the region from which I'm speaking to you, which is the state of Vermont and upstate New York. And I want to recognize and acknowledge that these are their ancestral lands. And this is going to come back again as we go into the talk, because the relationship between identity and culture and a sense of belonging and also language and script are really at the heart of everything that I'm going to be talking to you about. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is to talk about what I'm calling custom scripts in South Asia. So these are scripts that are created usually by an individual, often by a very young individual. Many of these scripts were created by teenagers, in fact, and usually out of a sense that it was important that they dedicate this extraordinary labor on behalf of their language community. And we're going to start out, and this is unusual for me, actually, with some statistics, but first of all, some examples. So next slide, please. So some of you may recognize some of these scripts. Some of you may know all of them. This is kind of a quiz. The answers are going to turn up at the very, very end. But one of the things that I mostly wanted to do was to show what extraordinary richness and diversity and beauty there are in many of these minority custom scripts. I have to say that I am actually more familiar with custom scripts from Southeast Asia and Africa, which is another reason why I wanted to do this talk. So again, out of my hope that that some of you will contact me and say, yes, I know all about this. I can tell you about that particular script and that particular language and community. So I'm going to, I've sent the PowerPoint in to CIIL, and I would like to make that PowerPoint available to anybody who requests it. So here we have kind of an interesting table. I am currently engaged in what I call the Red List project, which I'll tell you more about later. It's a project to try to identify every script in use in the world. And for the purposes of this particular slide, I'm looking at where custom scripts have been created and when. So what you'll notice is that there are, I've created these 4 regions of generation: Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and elsewhere. And I've also broken it down into scripts created before 1950 and since 1950. And so if we start over at the right, what you'll notice is that in Southeast Asia and elsewhere in the world, the rate of script generation is more or less consistent. So before 1950, elsewhere we've got 14. Since then, we've got 10. So it's becoming a little less common. In Southeast Asia, pretty much consistent. So the majority of scripts have been created in Africa and South Asia. If you look at the bottom, you'll see that the totals are in fact identical. But I have to say, this is an example of the fallible PowerPoint, because since I created that slide, I have learned of at least 4 other scripts that I didn't know about before, and all of them are from South Asia. The other thing I want you to notice is the timing. So in Africa, what you'll see is that there has been a long tradition, at least a couple hundred years, of domestically or indigenously created scripts. There are 21 of them, by far the most in the world, before 1950. And that number has grown somewhat, in fact, by nearly 50% since 1950. But if you look at South Asia, before 1950, we have 5. Since 1950, we have 47, or as I say, probably more like 50, 51, 52. So there is this extraordinary richness and growth in indigenously created, what I'm calling custom scripts in South Asia. And you would think that this would be world news. You would think that people would be studying this and studying the scripts, but also asking questions, about the phenomenon in general. But that is not the case. And if we go on to the next slide, we see, so there's no way we're going to go through this. There's 4 slides here. And first of all, there's no way I'm going to go through and name all of these because it would take forever. And secondly, this is the area where I've discovered I've actually made mistakes. But again, I wanted to put this on the PowerPoint so that anybody who's interested in this can actually order the PowerPoint and read it at your leisure. So can you just move slowly through the next 3 slides so we can see just how many of these custom-made scripts there are in South Asia? So let's move on to the next slide. We've just done A to G. Here we have H to K. So as you'll see, many of them created in the 70s and 80s and even more recently. Next slide, please. Still going strong. Some of these, of course, you'll recognize. Some of these, perhaps you don't recognize. And the last of these slides, please. Right. So that's an extraordinarily rich catalog. And if we were to look at all of them, what you'd realize is that their scripts are in many ways very, very different. As I said before, this is really the kind of subject that you would think would be widely studied, and it really isn't. And not only is this subject not widely studied, it's not widely respected. And I've given some thought to why. So if you could move on to the next slide. Why are news scripts not taken seriously? And this is really a question that very, very few people are asking, because all the other people, especially professional linguists, are busy not asking that question because they don't take news scripts seriously. And we'll think about why. Next slide, please. Right. So Piers Kelly, who I say he's an Australian anthropologist. As I said, he's one of the few people who's done field work, living with, staying with, visiting communities where they have created their own indigenous writing systems. And what he's discovered is that even though he's doing this groundbreaking work, it really isn't being widely studied or widely respected. And he says, I have often encountered resistance to their study, that is the study of indigenously created scripts. Scripts that have been deliberately devised in recent times have received less attention. So now we're hearing it from somebody who's right in the middle of this community, and he really sees what's going on in the profession. Next slide, please. Oh, this is great. So somebody on chat has already corrected something that I put in that catalog. Yes, I actually just received, that's one of the corrections that I was going to make yesterday when PowerPoint wouldn't let me. But I just received a wonderful document from a friend of mine in Sikkim about all of the scripts in Sikkim, and that was something that I couldn't add to this. Anyway, back to the story. So Piers Kelly, he identifies 3 common responses to new scripts or custom scripts. So the first one, or I should say, he identifies 3 common dismissive responses. So the first one is that people say, oh, invented scripts are not real scripts. In fact, they are often referred to as secondary or artificial. The idea being somehow that it's more real if a script evolves over time than if somebody sits down and goes through the enormous labor and work of trying to create a writing system that really works for their own language. Second dismissive response, people say, oh, they're rarely successful. And there's good reasons why they're rarely successful, because they face enormous obstacles of acceptance. It's really, really hard to get them approved and taught in particular. And so they face these huge obstacles that existing scripts don't, but instead of being supported, they're dismissed, rarely successful. And here's a really interesting objection. These new scripts simply add a distraction to the more important goals of orthography development. And by that, what he means is that usually somebody is dedicated to creating a writing system for a minority language culture, but it'll be based on, for example, the Latin alphabet. And that is seen as being important to developing literacy in that community, which of course is a very valuable and important aim. But what it doesn't do is to begin with the notion that it may be important for that culture to create their own. And there are two more dismissive responses that I've encountered in my work. One is that that new scripts are the work of enthusiasts, as if, first of all, as if enthusiasm were a bad thing. I'm a great fan of enthusiasm, and secondly, that that somehow amateurs are meddling in the business of linguistics. Whereas, of course, what we've just seen is that dozens of communities now have a writing system because of the dedicated work of people who were not professional academic linguists. Another and really interesting objection, and this is one that you tend to hear less from the academic community and more from the political or governmental community, that newly created scripts are political and they are the work of troublemakers. And to give you an illustration of how true this is, or how common and powerful this objection is, I know of at least 4 people who have been killed for creating a script for their community. Excuse me, something in my eye. At least 4 people have been killed. At least one creator of a successful indigenous script in Africa was arrested. There is a very strong sense that if you have a minority community, they are to be kept in check and suppressed. And as we will see, the effect of having their own script does exactly the opposite. It may well give them a sense of their own identity and value, which of course to an established government may seem as if they're being troublemakers, because they are actually asserting their own rights and their own identity as a sovereign people. Okay, let's move on. Another reason why new scripts are dismissed by professional academics is that it's a really interesting situation for me as somebody grew up using the Latin alphabet and no other script to be talking to you, because my bet is that virtually all of you habitually use at least 2 different scripts, and quite likely 3, 4, 5 different scripts. And yet the rules of linguistics were written by people from a community that really concentrated around one script. And that's why I'm saying it is virtually impossible for people from Latin script cultures to understand the importance of having one's own script. And I'm going to give you some reasons why. And I have to say, this is something that I've noticed, but I haven't noticed it anywhere else in published literature. And I think it's because of my work with the endangered alphabet has given me a sort of perspective to look back at my culture of origin and see some of its biases and shortcomings. So first of all non-Latin scripts are traditionally seen as inferior and have been for 150, 200 years in the West because Latin is dominant. And there has been perfectly serious arguments made that the Latin script is dominant because it's simply the best script. And in fact, this is not true for many reasons, but one of my sayings is that history is written by the winners in the alphabet of the winners. The Latin script has gained this dominance because it's been used by some of the world's most powerful armies and also by some of the world's most expansive, expansionist religions. And one of my other sayings is that the only reason that the Latin script is so dominant in the world is because at crucial times in history, it had more lawyers, guns, and money than somebody else. Another argument that's made about the Latin alphabet is that it has this intellectual and cultural pedigree, that the dawn of ideas comes from this whole Greco-Roman or Judeo-Christian heritage. And these are the best ideas, and so therefore the alphabet that carried them is the best alphabet. And it's wonderful for me to be able to say this to people who are from an entirely different cultural tradition, because you know what nonsense that is. And there was, for example, people making a perfectly serious argument up until just literally the last 20 years that Chinese, because it was not a true phonetic alphabet, was incapable of being used to represent abstract ideas, and therefore it limited the ability of Chinese people to think. And of course, Confucius was thinking, and his works were being written at a time when in Northwestern Europe, people were still very much living in the mud and existing with a notable absence of writing about abstract thought. More importantly, the Latin script is used so widely in 3/4 of the countries of the world that, and I speak as a Latin script user, we understand the relationship between culture and language. I see how important the English language is to me and my heritage and my understanding of the world. I see how important the French language is to the French and their understanding of the world. But we don't understand the relationship between all of those things and our script, because everybody, it seems to us, is using it. The Latin alphabet is like linguistic duct tape to us. It's just writing. It's just the stuff that you do. And again, one of the privileged positions that you have in South Asia is that you are much more aware of the complex interrelationships of multiple languages and multiple scripts than we are sitting over here in our little Latin temple. And the other point is that Latin script users are so secure in our alphabet, we have no conception of what it means to lose it. And even within recent memory, a number of scripts in South Asia have declined in use or fallen out of use almost entirely because they have been supplanted by other more widespread or more official scripts. So you know what that's like. It's inconceivable to us. And so we don't understand how important a script is to its culture of origin. Okay, next slide, please. And as I say, we, and in particular, I'm talking about people from the West who typically know and use only one script, in order to understand the significance and value of new scripts and also of traditional minority scripts. We have to learn to see these scripts from the viewpoint of their communities of origin, rather than from our viewpoint as the people who invented the study of linguistics and the people who write all the books and teach it in the universities. One of the enormously valuable things that's happened to me as a result of the Endangered Alphabets Project is that I have, as I say, I have gone out among the endangered alphabets, and now I've learned to see things very, very differently. Okay, so moving on. So in many communities in South Asia, and especially in Southeast Asia, there are actually script mythologies. Many cultures have script creation myths or narratives. In Southeast Asia in particular, there are many communities that have script creation and loss narratives. And I'm just going to quote you briefly from just one of them. In the 1820s, Karen villagers informed a Baptist ministry that God had given them writing on leather. The long version of the story is that there are many cultures where where some divine being gave them the gift of writing because they recognize writing is so important. It can't have been created by humans. It must have divine origin. But because of bad luck or their own foolishness, they didn't recognize its value and it got lost. So the piece of leather got eaten by a cow, or they put it in a hut along with fire, and the fire burnt the hut down, and they lost their writing. But the thing that interests me in particular about this quote is that they went on to say, since that tragic event, quote, we have been an ignorant people, without books, without a king, without a government of our own, subject to other kings and other governments. We have been a nation of slaves, despised and kicked about, trodden underfoot by everybody like dogs. So this is the flip side to the conventional notion that writing is one manifestation of civilization. The flip side of that is the very unpleasant prejudice that anybody who doesn't have writing or who doesn't have their own writing system is therefore primitive, is backward, and is subject to prejudicial treatment, and as we see here, seen as a nation of slaves who deserve to be despised and kicked about. And so what's happened here is that in this particular community, their sense of the importance of writing and the importance of not having their own script is so powerful. It has entered their own mythology. It's entered their own narrative about themselves and their sense of their own misfortune. That is incredibly powerful, but it's by no means the only culture that has that set of beliefs. So in a way, then, what we're seeing is that, in the privileged West, we're saying, oh, we can't imagine what it would be like, to lose our alphabet. So let's talk to somebody who can, and this is what it's like. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm going to look at just a couple of custom-made scripts from South Asia. And I've chosen a couple that are perhaps a little less familiar to you, because I don't want to be telling you stuff that you already know. And even here, what I really want to do, once again, is to offer you not facts, but suggestions. And you'll have to excuse my pronunciation, because this is, it's not a secret. It's something that I acknowledge all the time. I don't actually speak any of the languages that I carve and that I support and that I work with. I am a classic Westerner in that I speak English and a bit of French, and I sort of remember some German, but All of you speak more languages than I do. You may also speak English better than I do. So I've brought this example in for a couple of reasons. One is that it's a very recent submission to the Unicode standard. And in fact, this is a quote from a letter in support of Mundari Bani being included in Unicode from the president of the organization representing the community. Because obviously one of the important criteria for Unicode acceptance is that this script be sponsored and supported by its language community. And so in this letter, what he says is, we see many languages die out gradually as successive generations of speakers become bilingual and then begin to lose proficiency in their traditional languages. So you're all familiar with this phenomenon, I'm absolutely sure. And at this point, he's talking more about endangered languages than endangered scripts. But one of the other reasons why I'm including this letter is because it shows the connection between the two of them. So he continues, we experience that the Mundari speakers seek to learn more prestigious languages in order to gain social and economic advantages and to avoid discrimination. So yes, what we're talking about here is economic globalism or economic colonialism. So many languages and scripts are endangered because of the fact that their culture has been literally overrun by another culture's army. But in many cases, as you know, it's a slower process. It has to do more with sort of economic invasion and advantage, and also this really powerful thing to avoid discrimination. So this is why my talk is partly about this issue of belonging. If someone believes they don't deserve a footprint on the earth, then their children start learning a different language. They start learning a different script. After World War II, when television became accessible and rapidly expanded in the United States, much of the early television programming was cowboys and Indian stuff. And in Cherokee households, you had this really nasty generational divide where the parents were speaking Cherokee in the home. They were expecting their children to continue speaking Cherokee. And the children were seeing this very glamorous, glittery, shiny new stuff on television and all of these, products that were being advertised. And they were saying, no, we want to speak English. This is the language of the future, and this is the cool language. And of course, what this also meant was that they were seeing television shows about cowboys and Indians, which were all told from the cowboys' point of view. So literally, they were creating a kind of cultural suicide because of this invasion, this cultural invasion by television. He continues, Mundari is categorized as a vulnerable language. And then something very interesting here. A good number of books have been written in English, Hindi, and other regional scripts, but there is a problem of accurate pronunciation of Mundari. And that is leading to poor acceptance of these literary works by Mundari speakers. So what's really important here is that speaking one's own traditional community language is supported and reinforced by reading it and writing it. And if you don't have the opportunity to read and write it, or if the way in which it is written is not a good representation of the way it's spoken, then you start getting a decline in the use of that language right away. So one of the reasons why the Barry brothers invented the Adlam script in West Africa was because their father was actually, he had a shop in the market, and he was a literate man. And so people who received letters would bring them to him to read the letters to them. And traditionally, writing was done in Arabic, but Arabic really didn't represent the sounds of the language very well, to the point where it wasn't even clear at times what these letters were about. So the whole idea of saying, we want to educate and we want to give these people opportunities, and so we're going to give them our writing, may actually be a contradiction in terms. Next slide, please. And in this letter to Unicode, he concluded, because of this script, we see a ray of hope, not only to keep Mundari language alive, but also for its development. And this is my own words. In other words, the development of a new script may also serve the revitalization of a traditional language and its culture of origin. It's a huge amount of work, it must be said. There are many instances of people creating new scripts and then having to write books by hand or newspapers by hand, because of course they haven't been digitized, or there are no physical typefaces. But what script does, this is a new idea, I'm actually going to have to think about this and say it as it comes to me. What a script does is to pull together and provide both stability and solidity in the developing collective wisdom of the community. And that is true whether it's a traditional script or whether it is a new script that is, so to speak, emerging into its community of origin. Next. And here we actually have that very same letter, or a facsimile of it, in the Mundari Bani script, which I think is, it's always a tonic for me to see a script that I cannot read, because it's a way of reminding me that I don't know everything. In fact, I know very little. And so I look at this and I say, great, this is an example of a serious intellectual endeavor and a communication about the importance of the survival of a culture. And I can't read it. It puts me in the outsider position. Whereas, of course, as Latin script users and English speakers, I'm used to being in the insider position. Okay, next slide, please. I also want to introduce, some of you may know the Monroe script, but it's certainly one of the less well-known ones. And I'm using this example because the creation of the Monroe script is very, very clearly more than simply about trying to give symbols to sounds. So the traditional Western definition of writing is all about symbols and sounds. You know, these are just graphic ways of representing the sounds of spoken language. And that really doesn't explain at all the significance of writing, nor does it explain the significance of a particular writing to its culture of origin. So the Mro people, I've actually been to Bangladesh. I've met some Mro people. I'm regularly communicating with many of them. So they have their own traditional language. They live in Bangladesh, also across the border in Myanmar, also across the border in India. They are a culture that has been dealt with badly in many ways, especially in their own country of Bangladesh. where Mro is not taught as a language nor as a script. And so straight away, a young Mro child learns that they are in some way inferior. They're in some way, as I was saying, outsiders. And that if they want to get ahead, then they should abandon their language, their script, and learn the national language of Bangla, or ideally even learn the international language of English. So next slide, please. So I want to tell you a little bit about the creator of the Mro script. Remarkably, I was sent an account of his life and the script creation by his nephew, Phungpray Mro. And it's very, very interesting, because the reasons why he created a script for his people and the purposes for which he created that script are quite common more in Southeast Asia than in South Asia, but definitely in both places. And they really, again, show how broad the value of one's own writing system is. Next slide, please. So as you saw, this Manley Mro, as a kid, he was a teenager. He was 18 when he created this script. And what is especially interesting to me is that he didn't only create a script, but with it came a religion and a form of social organization. This is remarkably common. The most well-known example is the creation of the Pahomong script by Song Wei Yang, where the fact that he created a script for the Hmong, who once again were seen as outsiders, were despised, were discriminated against throughout Southeast Asia, who also, by the way, had their own mythology of once having had an alphabet or a writing system that had been lost in time. So by creating a script for them, he gave coherence and purpose and value to the Hmong in his region. And this, of course, was so important to them, and it changed the way the Hmong thought about themselves to such a degree that eventually the government of Laos sent soldiers to assassinate Song Wei Yang, because he was a troublemaker. He was giving the Hmong a sense of their own identity and purpose. But here, I'm giving you this example here because I actually have this quote from what is happening and what happened as a result of the creation of this alphabet in Mro society. So the name of the religious book of the Kramad, so the religion and the name of the alphabet is Krama. And so the name of this book is Reongkhati. It is also recorded in their religious customs and rules of life. So what we're seeing then is that this script has such a powerful effect on its culture that it becomes an organizing principle. The Karama Directive shows the decentralizing of power according to social action. Each village is led by 6 gurus in whom some separate responsibilities are entrusted. It's the responsibility of the Shang Up to provide herbal treatment, justice, and legal advice held by the Arip Up. It's up to the Ori Up to make a law for villages, and the Sangmi Up for the education of the children in the village, and the Prasar Up for the interpretation and promotion of religious issues. So the alphabet is so much a part of the community, and its appearance and arrival is such an important issue that it becomes the basis of the religion and the social order. And as I say, this is by no means the only culture in which this is the case. But it really goes to show that the idea of coming in from the outside and introducing a script which is an outsider script, and especially the fact that in many cases that's been brought in by missionaries who therefore introduce a different religion, it fails to understand how powerful it may be for a community to have these things generated internally. Next slide, please. Here is an example of, this is from a Moreau font book that the Endangered Alphabets Project created. And this is for a school in the hill tracts of Bangladesh, which was actually teaching not only the standard one language policy, government dictated Bangla language and script, but also indigenous scripts. So we actually made this as an alphabet wall chart, which went up on the wall. We made rubber stamps so kids could learn their script by stamping out their letters. Next slide, please. I did a carving. This is mother tongue in Moreau. Needless to say, that is the shores of Lake Champlain in Vermont, where it is a lot colder than it is in the hill tracts of Bangladesh. Next slide, please. But we also did something else for this school, which now is being used by multiple schools. We created a multiple language, a very simple 100-word multiple language visual dictionary for the school kids. So what we have here is a picture of a frog, and then we have the word frog in English and Bangla and Tripura and Mro and Marma and Chakma. And we've done it in a circle so that when we're avoiding this idea of a hierarchy, so that we're not saying that one language and script is more important than the others. We're saying you live in a multilingual community. The hill tracts are extremely multilingual and multi-scriptural. And all of these scripts and all of these languages are part of your exploration of the world. And so the Endangered Alphabets Project, we did a fundraiser, we came up with some money, and we produced this this children's illustrated dictionary, which I think is possibly the first of its kind in the world. Next slide, please. So let's do some summary and let's talk about the advantages of custom scripts. I'm going to be talking about some of the things I've already said and adding some other things. So let's move on to the next slide here. Right. So custom scripts may make literacy more available to those traditionally denied an education, especially women in Islamic regions that traditionally used Arabic as a teaching medium. So I've received absolutely passionate emails from women in West Africa talking about the fact that before the creation of the Adlam script, they would not have been educated, they would not have learned to read and write in traditional Muslim culture. And that really that script has utterly transformed their lives and their opportunities. The second one, this is a whole lecture in itself. Custom scripts may have something to teach us about the possibilities of writing itself, because they may include features that mainstream writing systems do not. So those of you who are interested, I'll happily, absolutely bore you to death by telling you about aspects of traditional and non-traditional minority scripts that do things with writing that we don't typically think of as being, this is what writing is and this is what writing is for. Amongst those things is the next one. Custom scripts may be so closely connected to spiritual practice that the characters or glyphs cease to be mere phonemes, but become charged with numinous power, become in effect a portal between the world of matter and the world of spirit. In your region, this is certainly true of the Sora Sompeng script, It's true of other scripts elsewhere in the world, that the act of creating a symbol is in fact an act of communicating with the spirit world. Custom scripts may be designed around shapes and forms such as animals, plants, topographical features, etc., whose familiarity not only makes them easier to learn, but establishes a sense of cultural ownership. So this is certainly true, for example, of the Wancho script recently created by Banwang Losu. It's true of a number of other scripts that I know about in South Asia, and probably many that I don't know about. Again, I would love to hear from all of you because you know more about this stuff than I do. Their very existence may symbolize a break with a history of catastrophe and loss. The best examples I know of this are actually cultures that don't have a new script, but they illustrate what happens if you don't. So I did a couple of carvings in Ainu and in, give me a second here, where's the other one? Okinawan, right. So these are both now cultures within the island chain of Japan, but both are cultures that were overrun by what they call mainland Japanese cultures and treated abominably and discriminated against and marginalized in many, many ways. And when I went to carve a proverb in each case from their culture, there was this question, which script should I carve it in? Because to carve it in Japanese was to act as a reminder of the fact that they had been invaded and marginalized and treated so badly for 300-400 years. So to use the script of the conqueror may well be to act as a reminder of this history of catastrophe and loss. So a new script, in a sense, is a gesture of defiance, a gesture of claiming one's own identity and one's right to belong. And that in turn, this last one, may provide visual symbolism that galvanizes and coheres a culture that may be marginalized, impoverished in every sense, geographically and spiritually shattered. And the best example I have of this, okay, so don't look at the slide now. I'm going to hold up something which is actually kind of big. So this is the Amazigh flag created as part of the Amazigh Renaissance in North Africa. And at the heart of the flag is a letter. This is the letter Yaz. And the reason for that is that, and this is not a new script, although it's about the making of a new script. So the Yaz is one of the letters in the revival of the Tifinagh script, which had been used in various forms for 2,000 years in North Africa. And so by reviving that script or creating a new script that was based on it, what they were doing was saying, we have always been here. We were here before the Romans, before the Arabs, before the French and the Italians. And it, in one single letter, it creates a visual symbol that reasserts their right to have their own dignity and their own identity. Next slide, please. Hello, next slide, please. Oh, great. So I was giving a talk about this by Zoom a little while ago, and the next morning I got sent this photograph. And so this photograph is of a mother script school in Jharkhand, where the Tolongsiki script is being taught for the Horukh language. And the caption, the person who sent me this photograph by email said, "We can take it from here." And it's just wonderful to see this happening. But the question is, can they take it from here? As I said earlier, creating a new script and then getting used and propagated and taught is enormous amount of work. Next slide, please. And so this is one reason why I've undertaken the Endangered Alphabets Red List project, where we're trying to identify every script currently in use anywhere in the world and to assess the relative health or vulnerability of each one. Next slide, please. Because until you have that documentation where you can say, yes, this script exists and there are only 30 or 40 people still using it, or this script is new and at the moment it's only being taught by one person through a Facebook group. Until you have that documentation, there is no sense, either in government circles or in nonprofit circles or in academic circles, of the threat or the urgency, which means it's not given any priority, this whole issue of script importance, which means there's no funding for it, which means there are no research grants or faculty positions or government agencies or degree programs. And there's also no study of best practices or support for emerging scripts. So the endangered language revitalization movement, which is now about 20, 25 years old, has all of these things. And it's wonderful that that is happening. But at the moment, there is no equivalent in scripts. Next slide, please. So what I'm actually going to propose is a script incubator program. What this would do is to help people and communities who have created a script with the very difficult and often challenging and complex task of getting that script to a point where it actually does become useful and where it represents that community. And there are many steps that are involved here. We would want to provide professional technical evaluation in the new script just to make sure it actually works, to suggest strategies for working with the community, very, very important if you want to get the script adopted, to bring in people who are professional font developers and type designers, to offer help in digitizing the script and guidance in developing a Unicode proposal, providing information about best teaching strategies. And then what I really want to do is actually to create a team of people all over the world who have created a script for their community so that they can talk to each other and talk to new script creators about how they did it and what challenges they faced, and to give each other sort of help and advice. So I have to end with a pitch always, because the endangered alphabets, we are so far ahead of the curve in terms of looking at script revitalization, that there is no funding, there are no grants, there are no faculty positions, there are no degree programs. And so every time I give a talk, I say, this is how to support us. And so we ask for money. In the case of this particular group that I'm talking to now, one of the most valuable forms of support you can give us is information, and is letting me know more about the traditional and emerging scripts of South Asia. So, as I say, I'm going to make the slideshow available. I hope that you will feel free to contact me either through the CIIL or directly, tim@endangeredalphabets.com. That is, can you bring up the next slide? Yes, those are the answers to the, which scripts were those. So in fact, what I'd like to do now is to stop the screen sharing so that I can actually talk to you and hear your questions and suggestions and comments.
Can I have an early word?
Yes,
yes.
Yeah. I found this very interesting. I mean, being in India, where we have had so many scripts and all that, and of course, I am trying to step back into time and think, there was this one common script like Brahmi, from which evolved so many of the present day scripts in modern India. And I think we have hardly given importance to our origins of our own script, for instance. I don't think anybody teaches in any university much about the origins of their own script. There's a whole history to be done, a series of scripts that have come in between, intervening changes and all that, and very well documented. It's over a whole time. But somehow we are privileged, we are not given enough importance to writing per se. I mean, as a thing to be inquired into, the changes that are coming. We talk of language change often, but we don't talk enough of script change that has taken place over millennia. And I think there's a huge amount of data in there, and we are not tapping into that. So I think, why have we done this, and why have we not done it? Is it because we privileged literacy below oralcy? Is it a question of this? And I know for certain that we had this very deep culture in oral traditions in this country. The entire grammar in Sanskrit, one of the greatest grammarians, is entirely written based on oral tradition. Then all the rules of the grammar are based for oral consumption and all that. So those of us who think that the life of language will be gaining through the intervention of script may also want to sort of not take that as the only position, because the commitment to the spoken language, to come up with a pedagogy that is anchored in promoting the oral culture, is equally important. We can't dissociate the importance of oral cultures from literacy endeavor. So that's my sort of comment on that. I had something else to say about one of the slides that you showed.
Can we just stick with that one for
I think we'll stick with that.
There are other people who want to jump in as well. And besides which, we've raised a really interesting point. So when linguistics first emerged as a discipline, one of its most long-lasting effects was to argue that script was actually secondary and less important than the study of spoken language. And as you say, there are many good reasons for doing this, but the long-term effect is that I have spoken to people who said, I wanted to do a PhD in writing systems, or I wanted to do graduate work in a script, etc., but I was told it would be professional suicide, because for a professional linguist, writing is secondary. Writing is not as important as a spoken language, and that absolutely that tradition exists until today. Okay, Samar, great to see you. I'm so glad you sent me that email just a couple of days ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Tim, thank you for your beautiful talk. I'm really impressed, as you have always been doing so for me. And that talk and the PowerPoint presentation that I made very recently was because of you. It's not because of me, but because of you have inspired me enough to work on it. Tim, I have got two things to say, as you might have pointed out in my PPT also earlier, that there are projects where languages are documented, but we do have certain projects, especially I've mentioned, like one of the projects is the Center for Endangered Languages, Sikkim University, of which Professor Rajesh Sachdeva, Sujay, and others are involved in various capacities. We are not just documenting languages, but we are also looking into the scripts. In fact, my friend from here who are here have also conducted like workshops, the most successful workshops on scripts of Sikkim. So I think some of the projects have not neglected the script documentation along with the language documentation, and we are for sure that we are part of script documentation also.
Yes, you are absolutely a leader in this respect, and I have learned a great deal from you, and I utterly encourage and applaud the work that you're doing, especially in an area like Sikkim, which is an area where there has been such a historic movement of of people and cultures where you have the opportunity to study how, for example, you'll have a language that is written with one script on one side of the border, but with a different script on the other side of the border.
Yes.
It's the work that you're doing is of enormous value.
Thank you. Tim, I have got one more point to say. Professor Sachdev, I spoke about the functional aspect, and most of us, we look into it I look script more from a theoretical perspective or to understand it. When I was working on these 5 scripts that I had mentioned to you earlier, I found that they are based on the Devanagari system. Only the graphic form is different. Underlying system behind the cosmetic makeup of the script or of the letters or of the character is the same as of Devanagari. Their division of vowel and consonant is the same, or arrangement of the letters are also the same, and markers are also the same. However, there are certain changes which are emerging as these languages are trying to accommodate the speech sounds. Earlier, it was not done by linguists, but now as linguists have entered it, it's constantly evolving, it's changing. So I think we need to look into not from the cosmetic point of view only or from the graphic point of view only, but also from underlying system. What is the system that the script is following? I think that will be very interesting. Then only we can know how many systems, writing systems are there. In fact, if I look into some scripts, they are basically a Akshara system. They are just following the Akshara system of the Brahmi. Only the cosmetic outside is changed, which represents speech sounds, but underlying system is the same. So I think we need to focus on that aspect also in the study of script. That is what I strongly felt after all these years.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I also, again, one of the privileges I've had in looking at minority scripts from around the world is to find scripts which really don't follow those same basic rules. So when you see the Mandombe script, for example, it is so dramatically different from anything we understand, either in terms of the cosmetic graphic look or in terms of the structure, that it really raises great questions about how writing works, about what kinds of qualities writing might conceivably adopt or include. It's just fascinating. And so one of my favorite glyphs in the world is the Balinese Pamada, which is there is no equivalent in English or in the Latin alphabet. It's a symbol which means what follows is a sacred text. And that means that writing is doing something completely different to what we're used to it doing. It is asking the reader to adopt a certain state of readiness and openness in approaching the text. And that's part of a whole Balinese tradition or and also Javanese tradition of spiritual and sacred writing. But again, when traditional academics talking about linguistics talk about writing, they're not thinking about that. They're not recognizing that those practices are being used successfully elsewhere in the world. And it's like, shouldn't you actually go out there and look at that? Okay, we've got time for a couple more questions.
I believe there are a couple of questions in the chat box. By Krishna Prasad Chalice, how do you distinguish script and orthography? Does some modifications in one script make a new script?
Yes, so this is a question that we are really having to consider when we create this Red List project, because you have all kinds of different issues. So for example, the Latin alphabet, as you know, has all of these different modifications for being used for spoken languages all over the world. Is it still the Latin alphabet, or has it changed by the invention of an O with a diagonal line for it? In a sense, that's a technical question, but for me, the endangered alphabets has always been more about the identity and human rights of a culture than about the technicalities of linguistics. So the reason why, I'll give you a great example. So for about 1,000 years in Vietnam, the Vietnamese language was written in a script called Chu Nom. And it was very similar to and was derived from Han Chinese. And all of the great works of Vietnamese literature and many of the important cultural documents for those people were written in Chu Nom up until the end of the 19th century. And then they switched over to the Latin alphabet. So I did an exhibition, including a carving in Chu Nom, because virtually nobody in Vietnam can read those documents anymore. And at that exhibition was a young student from China. And he said, that can't be an endangered alphabet because I can read most of it. And I said, it's not endangered to you, but it is endangered to the Vietnamese. So their sense of their sort of cultural richness and their written record is now inaccessible to them, or else it has to be laboriously translated. And as everybody knows, you know, if you have poetry in one language or one script and you translate it, you're going to lose something, especially in a script as complex as, you know, a Chinese-based script. So for me, the issue about how we define what is a different script almost comes down to what is the role of that script in its culture of origin. So again, in the hill tracts of Bangladesh, you have the Marma people who write in a script which is very, very similar to Burmese. It has a few separate characters, but it's very much the same kind of script. But here's the point. The Marma people see it as their script, which under a traditional and under the government law of education in Bangladesh, they are not taught. And so, again, it's a script that may be widely used or maybe widely recognized, because Burmese script, of course, is quite widely used, but it becomes a token of the marginalization of the Marma people in Bangladesh. So in the end, I think that I'm probably going to come down on the side of not thinking like a typological linguist, but thinking like somebody who's interested in the role of script in the human rights and the dignity and the social justice that faces people all over the world.
I can still comment just briefly on something of an experience. I was talking about the Santali group in, which is in three of our states. It's there in West Bengal, written there in Bengali script. It's written in Jharkhand side with the Devanagari script by some, and in the Odisha side, they're written in the Odia script. People who pick up literacy in those languages. So when they came up with the old Chiki script, which they now take it as their own creation and which they value so much, we thought of suggesting a multilingual primer, something on the lines that you were suggesting, that you had this multilingual primer. But when we put that idea to the entire literature committee of the Santals, the people, they told us, we don't want any of the supports. We want just old Chiki. Because for us, everybody must come together under one script, one umbrella script. We don't want any pedagogical ease. We don't want to ease the task of learning. We want to let it be difficult, but let it be one with unifies. Let the struggle for the acquisition of script be part of our identity.
And that's a fantastic illustration of a moment in history. Yeah. So at this moment in history, that the Alchiki script has become sort of what the Pahomong script did for the Hmong people. It becomes something that is such a powerful validation that now in 20 years' time, they may think differently. And 20 years ago or 50 years ago, it wasn't possible. So yeah, this for me, this is just a great illustration of how writing is so much more than just a means of representing sounds of speech.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so we have two more questions. I see three more. Okay. One by Jayanta Kumar Mahata. What is your opinion about Chisoi script? And after that, we will take Tariq Khan's question.
Okay, so this question is a perfect illustration of how little I know. So all I know about the Chisoi script, and all I know about many of the recently created scripts of South Asia, is what would you say? Sort of factual and functional. I know it exists. I've been given some information about it. What I would really like to know is the circumstances of its birth and its creation, its significance to its user community, and the degree to which it's being used and for what reasons. So this is really my red list research. This is the stuff that I really, really could use your help on, because if you look at a Unicode proposal, for example, it gives some factual material, but it doesn't say anything about the life and value. So, for example, there is the Kaya Lee script, which is a Karenni script out of Myanmar. If you look at the Unicode proposal, it just says it is being taught in Thailand in refugee camps. And I'm thinking, what? And so I looked into it. And of course, as a result of the cultural genocide acts in Myanmar in the 80s, and of course, more recently with the Rohingya, you have these vast populations living in these terrible conditions in refugee camps. And in order to maintain their sense of integrity and value, they speak their own language and they teach their own script. It's really part of mental health and spiritual health, but that isn't in the Unicode proposal. And so what I would love to do is to hear from all of you about these scripts that I know about only sort of from the outside and from a distance. And as I say, I've given you the questions that I have. You know, what are the circumstances of its origin and birth? What is its importance right now to the community? So that's what I have to say about Chisoi. And the other question was?
Tariq Khan, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity. I know it's getting late. Thank you so much, team, for the interesting and insightful talk, and the discussion that followed also was very informative. My question is related to a practical situation that we face here in this office. Very often we receive requests from individuals to recognize scripts that they have developed. And in say last 2 to 3 years, we have received script names like Navlipi, Vishwalipi, Saraswati Lipi, Akshay Lipi, Mahalipi. Lipi is the word for script in this part of the world. And all of them claim these to be world scripts or global scripts or universal scripts.
Exactly.
Many of them claim these to be universal scripts, but these are individual inventions. And our responsibility in these claims is to say whether these scripts can be endorsed or not, and we look at whether these scripts represent a writing system or a keying system or not. Most often these are not keying systems, so there is no technological backup to these scripts. These are mainly symbols, a set of symbols, and not a system which is traditionally or culturally developed and not even technologically supported. So what do you suggest? I was very happy to see that you suggested that new scripts, new inventions should be supported. Personally, I would also be endorsing that view. But how does an institution react to such developments? That's one thing. If permitted, I would also like to add a little to what Professor Deva had said about Old Chiki. Old Chiki is also an individual's creation, which was later on taken up by the community, and then now the community is demanding it to be their declared their script for whatever states wherever their language is used. In addition to that, now the demand that they are raising recently is to launch courses written in those scripts, books written in those scripts, and also to make institutional facilities, like we have University Grants Commission, which conducts exams for recruiting faculty members. So those should occur in their script. Our problem is we produce books for Santali language also, and we find ourselves in a fix, whether we go for Devanagari or Roman or Bangla or Odisha or Old Chiki. So these are some of the issues on which I would like you to reflect, please.
Yes. So Tariq, you are in this perfect position to be part of the team or the consultants or whatever you want to call it for what I'm calling the script incubator, because all of these issues are exactly the kind of thing where you're saying, I want to encourage this, but how do I, for example, how do I connect this individual person who's come up with the script with the community that may then or may choose to use it or may not use it? How do I connect that person with somebody who can actually help them to create a keyboard-friendly version? And how do you make these priority decisions in terms of significant expenditure, as you say, to produce primers or readers in one or multiple scripts? That's an expensive business. So I think I really hope that you and I can continue to have conversations about this, because what you're doing, and as I was saying to Samar earlier, what you're doing is leading the way for the world, because in most places this discussion isn't even taking place. You've just got that one person working on his own, because it's usually a young man, and doing incredible amounts of work, which may or may not wind up having any value for the community because of all of these circumstances. So I would love to be able to sort of continue this conversation with you as we go forward, because, as I say, I know of almost nobody who's even asking the questions that you're asking.
Yeah, so Vicham had a question. Vicham, are you there?
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you, Professor Tim, for the beautiful talk. I'm from Sikkim. If you remember, we had some correspondence through messenger and email about the script from Sikkim.
Yes.
I have one very quick question. I think adaptation and interoperability is the main issue for why we are failing with the new script. Another reason for failing is it's because of the power and the precision associated with our language and other languages. So with this, I want to ask, under the Endangered Alphabet project or through your this initiative, have you done any, could you manage to encode any language in the Unicode? And the second thing, this is not a question, but I want to hear your opinion on this. I may go a little bit against the tide. For me, if the community so desired with the invention of new script, absolutely okay. But observing my community and other communities like Nagas in the Northeast India, I think adaptation with the regional script or national script or whatever is popular globally is seems to be more practical. Yeah, as I said, if the community so desired, absolutely no problem. But I feel we should be focusing more on the orthography rather than the script. But yes, this is a little bit against the tide. But I want to end with my part with say, without people like you, I think our endeavor in the endeavor for the documentation and the work for endangered languages will be no more. So thank you so much for your strong, for being the champion in this.
Yeah.
That's you're doing me too much credit, but I am grateful for your kind words. I think what is important is that the people who are involved in orthography development, for example, and clearly everybody here is well aware of this, is that they are aware of the various possibilities of the different approaches. So, for example, there is a tradition of Christian missionaries bringing in a Latin-based orthography, not because they respected the spiritual practices of the community that they were visiting, or that they respected their right to express themselves in their own fashion, but because they thought that this would be the best for them. If everybody involved is able to look at the different advantages, then of course they may well make the decision, yes, we're going to use a Devanagari-based system as we develop. All I'm saying is that so little work has been done in the study of writing and script that it doesn't even occur to people that an indigenously created script might have the meaning and value that it could have. Because for example, I have literally heard people say it's to their own advantage to learn English. Do they really want to spend their rest of their lives in the mud? Right? So the assumption is that we are doing them a favor by removing them from their traditional culture and their origins. Now, clearly, your group is infinitely more enlightened than that, and you're totally aware of the various possibilities that orthography development or script development could offer. And that's why I feel as if, you are leaders, you are world leaders simply by asking these questions in an informed fashion.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I myself have several questions, but I'm afraid we have to stop here because I have to chair a session in Tamil Internet Conference in 2 minutes. But because I know,
yes, please have people send their questions to me by email.
Can you stick in your email ID in the chat box, Tim?
Yep.
And see, we are also working an orthography development project here at the Institute on Lingam, which is spoken in Meghalaya. So we are we will invite you for a special symposium to do only related to developing a script for Lingam. Right now, we are thinking it's going to be a Latin-based script, but I am 100% sure we will definitely have some issues for underrepresenting or overrepresenting sounds. So we are still in the process of identifying the sounds in the first place. We will get in touch with you, and maybe this is the beginning of your journey with the CIL. We will continue this in other platforms. I really wish you people can continue the discussion, but I am sorry I have to go. But if anyway, looks like you have put in your email ID there, people can write to you. And when we have a symposium on orthography development, we will invite other people as well. So this dialogue will continue.
Excellent.
Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and for being part of the commemoration of the 53rd Foundation Day celebration of the Institute, which began on July 17. So many months have passed by, but we are very happy, and I liked your script incubator program. I hope we will take many out of the incubation and see that they are in real use to the communities. I thank all of you present here, and special thanks to Tim. Have a lovely day and happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thank you. And thank you to absolutely everybody. I hope to talk to you again. Take care, Samar. I hope to talk to you all again many times.
Thank you, team. Thank you, Basti.
Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely evening and a great day for other people. Bye. Bye, team. I will write to you again. Bye.
Bye bye.